Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This is broken. Someone broke my microphone. Oh no. How long the session's going to be? I don't know. It's like, how long am I going to be here? You know,
we know the answer to that.
No, we don't. You're not a bishop.
But you're going to bury me, and
Well,
I'm going to die for 10 years or so.
I mean, you don't know. We never know, you know.
Right.
Who knows these things? Is everything okay? They're just chit-chatting? Okay. I'm assuming everything's okay. I don't see tears. Okay.
Can Janet still get by me?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, tonight, hello if you're joining us online. Welcome in, everybody. It's good to see you. I apologize for the back and forthness of the schedule and everything. Next week, I think I'm good.
Yeah, you did.
I think I'm good all the way up through the end of May. I think so. And then early June is the annual conference. I should be fine. But we will finish Exodus. And then we'll take some time off the summer. And I had a moment of clarity when I was driving through the hills of Missouri. I was like, what are we going to study next? And I thought what would make the most sense for us to go to is the Gospel of Matthew. And let me explain why. And maybe you'll understand a little bit more tonight. Because tonight we're going to be talking about the Ten Commandments. Right? So Moses goes on top of Mount Sinai, and he, for some reason when I say Sinai, I always think of cyanide. Is anybody else just me? Okay. Well, cyanide, like the tablet, like you kill yourself with, if you're Russian, like a Russian spy. I don't know. Okay, there's my dark humor. Okay, so I always think of Moses and Sinai and the Ten Commandments, and then you have the Sermon on the Mount. And Matthew is a very kind of Jewish gospel. I don't mean that as a derogatory way. I mean as a descriptor, right? Matthew wants you to see Jesus sort of as the new Moses, or as a fulfillment of all the things that God has taught. That's why it's the first gospel in the Old Testament. It bridges the Old Testament to the New Testament. So, we've studied Mark in here. We've not talked about the other gospels, and there's 4 of them, so I thought we would go to Matthew next, especially with Exodus sort of fresh in our minds. It would be, I think, enlightening for us to see. Okay, so that's that. I have some notes for us tonight on the handouts. And hopefully we'll get some good conversation going. I think we will. Is everything okay? You don't need a pastor out there, right? Okay. All right. Tonight we're going to read 2 chapters, Exodus 19 and 20. And we will get oriented. You'll notice that we have skipped a little bit. We skipped 15, 16, 17, and 18. And we'll talk about that in the recap here in a little bit. And I'll do some praying. Then I have a video. We'll hop into the text, and then there's some archaeological stuff I want to share. But I think some of the discussion tonight will be around, some discussion. I think it'll be good. All right. So, before we get started, can I pray for us? Would that be okay? Yeah. Holy and gracious God, we give you thanks for the day that you've given us, being able to gather in this space, to crack open this book of the Bible and reflect on your word. So be with us this evening as we encounter you through this passage. Be with us here in person and online and everywhere in between. Praise in your Son's name. Amen. I'll say this also, y'all. If this thing goes off, I need y'all to tell me. I'm not sure it's charged all the way, and I have the other handheld I'll switch to so you can follow me online. Otherwise, they lose all their audio online, and it's just me moving my hands around violently. Is he drowning? What's happening? Okay. So the handouts. I'll first go to the recap here, but we'll do the handouts first. There's 2 handouts. There's one that's a brief introduction to the Old Testament. That's the book. It's by Michael Coogan. This is about the location of Sinai, just this little block here. And I got just a couple little... I'm going to summarize it for you real fast in case you don't want to read it. But hey, it's literally 1 page. You can read that, right? The other stuff's sometimes intimidating, but this... check the box. Okay. So that's about the confusion or distinction between Sinai and Horeb, or Horeb, right? That is the mountain where God shows up, God's holy mountain. The reason why you have different names could be because of different sources. And we will recall together that there is the idea of the source theory with the JPEDs. That's the Yahwist, the Priestly, the Elohist, and the Deuteronomist. Deuteronomist, that's the right word. And if I'm confusing you, just read it there. You'll be good. There is a mountain I showed you all, I think, on week 3 when we talked about God calling Moses on Mount Horeb, where that's where the burning bush is. Some people think this is the same thing. I'll leave it up to you to decide. But there's a monastery that's there. I showed you the picture of the monastery. I don't know if you remember that. That's from the 300s. So that's been identified as Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb for 1,700 some odd years. It's been officially that place. But whether or not it was that or not, who knows? Other mountains have been suggested due to some archaeological evidence and some extra biblical evidence. So whether or not that convinces you or not, I'll leave that up to you to decide. All right, so that's this. The other handout I gave you was on the law. It's from the Dictionary of Bible and Religion, from an older dictionary, 1986, which is when that dictionary was published by William H. Gentz. That's here. So it's only 2 pages and then like another column or so. So it's also readable, I think. I hope it's helpful. Just some things to note on that handout. And this is the question that I want to begin the night with. Just some open discussion for you all. Where does law come from? It's a very simple question. Where does law come from?
The word law?
Not etymologically, but you and my wife would just be 2 peas in a pod. But where does law, like the idea of law, come from?
From the 10 Commandments.
And let's keep breaking it down. So from the 10 Commandments, from Torah.
Oh, good.
Torah means law, right? It means teaching. If you're Jewish, okay, Leviticus literally means from the tribe of Levi or relating to the tribe of Levi. So you'd have Levitical law.
Did not know that.
I don't know. This is exciting. This is good stuff tonight. But where does it come from? Like if you break an American law, give me an example of American law. Anybody? Bueller?
Don't
Speed limit.
anybody.
Don't kill anybody. Okay, so let's say you commit murder. Do we have, how many laws around murder do we have? You don't need to be specific, just multiple, okay? Are there different types of murder? Oh, there are different degrees of murder. There's manslaughter. This is also true in the Bible, right? There's different degrees of murder in the Bible. There's a whole entire law about like if an ox gets loose and kills somebody, like here's what you need to do. Okay, so where do you think that stems is funny? Where do those stem from? What do you think? Where's the idea of that from?
God gave it to Moses.
Okay, if you're Jewish, and you could even say if you're Christian, although you might disagree with me, you could say that it comes from God. What are other sources? If God is a source of law, what are other sources of law?
The other gods.
Okay, right? You could say it's got to come from something other than humanity.
Buddha.
Okay, well, sorry? There we go. Yeah, a king, an emperor, a ruler, a government leader, legal system. So they derive the law. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, why do you need law? Order, chaos, prevent chaos. Why else do you need it? Okay, so some leaders will take, a law and create it for themselves. We see this maybe in the tax code. All those laws. No, not at all, right? Some are used to create tax breaks for particular reasons. Good. Other thoughts on law, its creation, where it comes from?
Does it start from Genesis? Those were not laws exactly, but Adam and Eve broke a promise.
They broke something, right? They broke covenant.
Law, covenant. I mean, so it goes all the way back to the beginning of time.
It's definitely
Yeah. So we will encounter the letter of the law here in Exodus 20. Hold on. Let me get my notes right.
And when they get the laws.
I feel like I'm missing a page. I typed up 3 of these. Exodus 19 through Numbers 10. It's just the law. And it should not come as a surprise to us, considering the first 5 books of the Bible are called the law. But Genesis 1 through Exodus 19 has primarily been narrative,
Yeah.
not law, right? But there are, yes.
Okay, because, when Noah went on the ark, those people that were left behind broke something.
They did.
And I'm not sure they called it the law, but it was
For covenant or relationship. Okay, so consider this as well. Do you need laws in your house? Like when you were raising kids, or if you had laws? You had rules? What's the difference? Not much.
Better than your mother.
Well, no, I mean, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm also being somewhat just, I don't want to say serious, like to really reflect on this. Like if my children break a rule at home,
You get grounded or.
okay, you get grounded, or maybe you put a quarter in the swear jar, or or you put soap in the mouth, or you go pick your own switch. I don't know.
I remember those.
I just told y'all, these are examples. I actually don't spank my children. I really don't. And they're in. Do you hear me? They're right behind this wall, all 3 of them. Okay.
Sometimes you don't have to.
Okay. Well, sometimes you don't have to.
Sometimes our father didn't have to whip us, he just gives up milk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now I came from a family where I was spanked, and my parents came from a family where there was a paddle hanging outside in the garage, and there's the lineage there. Okay. I won't go into that, but just to reflect on that, right? If you're in your house and there's only like 5 of y'all, or 4 or 3 of y'all, versus if you live downtown in Indianapolis and the population is, pick the number, 10,000, right? Let's say you live in a neighborhood with 10,000 people. Do you need laws? Okay, because the relationships are more complicated. Like, can I dump raw sewage on my property? Can I dump it on my neighbor's property? Well, why not?
Can your dog?
Yeah, right? Can my ox, do you hear the law, though, beginning to emerge here? Can my sheep go graze on your property? Well, why not? Right?
Because it's a law.
Okay, well, it's only a law if it's designated a law.
A certain person's property.
Well, this is so good. Even our concept of private property, our concepts of human rights.
If you didn't have law and order, you would have a whole total chaos.
So where do all that come from?
Okay,
Where do all that come from?
that is the crux of the question.
That's the question. Where did that come from?
Where did it come from?
They evolve.
They do.
Laws evolve.
Yes.
As times change.
And we'll see the evolution of law even within the scriptures. Not only will we see, I think, I would argue, evolution of law in the Old Testament, but then you see interpretation of the evolution of that law in Jesus, who says, "You have heard it said, but I tell you," right?
We've learned a lot of people, there's a lot of different interpretations of law.
Okay. So let's go back to the crux of the question. Like, where does it come from? We think of some laws as completely universal. Like you could say murder is a universal law, but there are tribes that practice cannibalism and don't seem to feel bad about it. This is a hard question. Are they ignorant, or are they breaking a law?
Are they hungry?
Or they just need a ho-ho and a Twinkie, you know? Well, what do you think? What do you think? Are they breaking a universal law? Are they breaking a universal law?
Well, laws change in civil and
No, it's
So you would say they're not transgressing a higher moral good.
God says, do not know.
So I'm just interested in our language, right? You said God said, "Do not kill," and if we understand the interpretation of Exodus 19 and 20 as God's word to Moses, and he writes it down, you are correct. This is God's word, so it is from God.
But did God tell the cannibals?
Did God tell the cannibals? I don't know.
But if your society, if your culture doesn't know God, doesn't know what God says, has never heard about the Ten Commandments, they didn't know that. It's like, how do they come up with a way to live? I mean, how do they decide this is right, this is wrong? I mean, it's got to be some kind of order to society, and they've got to decide without God what's right and what's wrong. Can we do this? And I think most cultures come up with ideas that work so that they have order within the culture, society that they live in.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean if you have a child that is deformed, you kill the child?
Right.
Yeah, and their society may say that. They don't know God when they don't do that.
Right.
So culturally, to make things orderly, they don't want children that are deformed or defective, so they kill them. And that's what they've done, and it's right for them.
They have practiced that before.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's cultural. I mean, God came up with 10 biggies.
Okay. 10 words, 10 utterances. Yep.
But societies and cultures evolve independently of God. Many of them have over the thousands of years. So how'd they figure it out? How did the Egyptians decide that this is right and this is wrong?
There we go.
They didn't have God. God didn't say it. And obviously the Hebrews weren't telling them anything. So they we're going to do it our way. And yet their cultures thrive, and they have order and not chaos. So how do they figure that out? Man has got to decide what is right and what is wrong at some level for them.
Interesting.
And I think it evolves in the community.
I think so.
Okay.
Something happens, so then we decide we need to make a rule around that and change it.
Okay. I'm
Strongest survive.
so
Yeah.
The strongest seem to step up,
yes.
to either take power or to rule over others.
Yeah. There's some interesting things about that power dynamic that we'll get into tonight as well. So I'm hearing us say that we don't all think the same. That there's some differing voices in the room. That's okay. That's okay. I think when we read it, when we read Exodus 19 and 20 with those presuppositions, it's important to just consider the other side. Right? So for those of us who think God said it, it is written, that settles it, is there an alternative perspective? And for those of us that think that maybe humans had their hands in this more and they shaped this more for their liking, is there another perspective? That maybe actually there is a greater divine sense of law and right and wrong. And when we hold both those in our hand, I think we can have a very fruitful conversation. So,
You know, you think back to the Indians, they didn't have our God, but they had their God. And I think they were generally a pretty noble group, except they wanted their own stuff.
yes, yeah, there seemed to be a good sense of community order among other civilizations that are not Judeo-Christian.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting question. You know, it's just something to sit with a little bit as we think about law and its revelation. So let's recap Exodus a little bit. I have a little bit of one of those short videos from the Bible Project that will recap for us chapters 1 through 18. And then we're moving on with our lives, and we're going to be on the back half of Exodus, which is going to be great. Okay, chapter 1, Israelites are oppressed. 2, Moses' early years. 3, God calls Moses. 4, Moses is given signs. 5 through 11 is how Israel's promised deliverance and all the plagues. 12 through 13, that's my technical, theological term. Passover stuff. All right? 14 and 15 is crossing the Red Sea. 16 and 17, things that we skipped, this is like they're in the wilderness and they're complaining they're hungry, so God gives them bread. They're in the wilderness, and they're complaining that they're thirsty, so God gives them water. So bread and water in the wilderness. Chapter 18 I did not include in here, but Moses is like, the people keep coming to him, asking him to arbitrate. I'm going to say it again because it's actually very critical to understanding the flow into 19. People come to him and says, Moses, while I was walking, so-and-so didn't yield the right-of-way in the roundabout, and now I need to replace my chariot wheel. Who's responsible? They don't carry insurance, and they don't have the state minimum coverage. And Moses has to say, well, I guess call Geico, right? So he has to be the arbitrator for their legal disputes. And then Moses' father-in-law Jethro gives him some advice, and that's chapter 18. Okay, where's my thingy? It's over here. We can do this. Okay, as a reminder, I'm going to move off screen if you're online. We started over here in Egypt, and now we are wandering in the middle of nowhere. We are over here for a number of months. Some time will pass between Exodus 14, which is the crossing of the Red Sea, to Exodus 19:20, which is the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. Sometime. I think the biblical authors tell us 3 months. Some time has passed. So it's like, turn the page, next chapter, literally. And we're over there, somewhere. Exodus 1 through 18, I want to recap. Here's a short video, and then we'll go on from there. I'm sure it plays. You can do it. I believe in you. It worked on my computer. I checked it. But now I'm going to check the volume, hopefully.
The book of Exodus. Now, you're probably familiar with this book because of the epic story of Moses leading Israel out of slavery from Egypt.
Yeah, but that's just the first half of the book. The second half has Moses giving the 10 Commandments to Israel, along with these blueprints for making a sacred tent. Now, right here in the middle is this story that connects these two halves together, and it all takes place at the foot of a famous mountain.
Okay, so let's start back at the beginning.
So the first thing we have to remember is we're continuing the story from Genesis.
Yeah, in Genesis, God promised Abraham that through his family, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And Genesis ends with Abraham's family down in Egypt. When Exodus begins, 400 years have passed, the family grows and becomes the people group now called Israel.
But there's this huge problem because the Israelites are enslaved to this king of the Egyptians, a guy called Pharaoh.
This guy is really bad news.
Yeah, he's horrible. He disregards their humanity, he brutally enslaves them, and he even orders that all of the Israelites' sons should be killed by throwing them into the Nile River. He wants to wipe these people out. He's the worst character in the Bible so far.
Here's where we meet an Israelite woman who wants to save her son.
And so she does throw him in the river, but safely, in this little reed basket.
And Pharaoh's daughter finds this baby and takes him as her own.
And this is the boy who grows up to become Moses, the man who will rescue Israel from slavery.
So Moses grows up, and one day, much later in his life, he has this crazy encounter with God where he comes across a bush that's on fire, but it isn't actually burning up.
And God speaks from the bush, and he appoints Moses as the man he will use to deliver Israel.
So Moses goes to Pharaoh to tell him this news that God wants his people free.
And Pharaoh, he just pretty much laughs at him. He's like, who's this God Yahweh? And in fact, he's so offended by this request, he decides to make the Israelites work even harder.
So discouraged, Moses goes back to God and says, listen, this plan's not going to work.
But God repeats his promise that he's going to rescue them. And in fact, it's right here, for the first time in the Bible, that we hear the word redemption. It literally just means to purchase a slave's freedom. But God here uses this word to describe what he's going to do for enslaved Israel.
And God knows Pharaoh is going to resist, so he sends 10 different plagues, one after another, like turning water into blood, sending all sorts of pests and disease. These plagues are really severe.
They are severe, but we need to understand that the story is presenting these as acts of divine justice against one of the worst oppressors in the story of the Bible. And they're all aimed at the purpose of rescuing these enslaved people and defeating the gods of Egypt.
This all comes to a climax at the 10th plague, where God's going to kill the firstborn sons across all Egypt, every house. It's pretty rough.
It is, but it's also God's response for how Pharaoh killed the Israelite sons.
Now as you turn the page, you suddenly get 2 long chapters of detailed instructions for what's essentially throwing a dinner party with a recipe for a lamb.
Yeah, but this lamb is super important. God tells the Israelites to pick it out and to prepare it to be eaten. And they're supposed to take its blood and then paint it all over the doorframe of their house. And anyone who is in that house will be spared from this final plague. And so this meal, which is called Passover, it commemorates this key moment in the story where God brings his justice on human evil, but also shows mercy by providing this substitute.
This final plague makes Pharaoh angry, and he demands that Israel gets out of Egypt, which is great. But suddenly, as they leave, Pharaoh changes his mind. He has a change of heart.
But on top of that, we're also told that God hardens Pharaoh's heart.
Why would God do that?
Well, what we need to remember is that over and over in this story, Pharaoh has already chosen to harden his own heart. And so at this point, Pharaoh, he's not just evil, he's become monstrously evil. Even his own advisors think that he has gone way too far. And so how is God supposed to deal with such an extreme form of evil? And what we see in this story is that God uses his power to lure evil into its own destruction.
Pharaoh and his army are destroyed in the Red Sea as Israel passes into freedom.
And after this, we find the very first song of worship in the Bible, as the people praise God for redeeming them. And it's in this story that the word salvation is also used for the first time, which means simply to be rescued from danger.
Now that they're saved, you would think that everything should be great, but the story quickly turns. The Israelites start wandering in the desert. They're tired, hungry, lost. And you start to wonder, what's God doing? What were they saved for?
And we learn the answer to that question in the very next story, which ties the 2 parts of this whole book together.
Hi, this is Tim.
And this is
Yeah,
John.
We think one of the best.
Those are good guys. Okay. So that is, oh no, don't do that. I don't want you to just skip 10 seconds. I want to go to my next slide. Oh, please. Nope. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
Okay, at the end of Genesis, Joseph is in charge of everything, and as the people come to buy food, and when they finally run out of food, they have to, and finally run out of money to pay for stuff, they have to give their cattle, and then they finally enslave themselves to Joseph.
Okay.
400 years later, it's completely turned around, and Joseph's family is enslaved.
Yes.
How does that happen?
I don't know.
Okay, never mind that.
No, no. That's like right at the end of Genesis 50
Something like that.
says that there was, maybe it's the beginning of Exodus.
Yeah, there was a famine.
No, I'm thinking of Exodus 1:8. And then it says, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph.
Right.
So this Pharaoh arises, and they have long forgotten what Joseph did.
Yeah, 400 years have passed,
Right?
but something has happened more than just one Pharaoh.
Yes, I agree with you. But I think the narration wants us just to know that they've, I don't want to say fallen out of favor, but like rulers come and go, and another Pharaoh's here, and they don't remember that Joseph's family saved them during famine, and they don't seem to care.
No.
And they're concerned about their own power, that they will outnumber the Egyptians, that they will join their enemies, and so they need to treat them harshly with laws. Unless I start stepping all over people's politics, I'll just stop there. I'm just reading the text. That's what it says. Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to explore some more of that with you. I think is worthy of exploration. All right, so we are in Exodus 19, and I'm just going to read for you. I think I got 4 slides. Let's Paul ahead here. 1, 2, 3, 4, I have another slide after this. Don't look. Okay. I got 4 slides. Here we go. This will give us 2 chapters of the Bible, Exodus 19 and 20. So on the 3rd new moon, after the Israelites had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day, they came into the wilderness of Sinai. I'm going to just stop for a moment there, right? So on the 3rd new moon, we are reminded that the Hebrew people follow a lunar calendar. They don't follow our Gregorian solar calendar. So this is 3 months later, roughly. They journey from Rephidim, entered the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. Israel camped there. Pause. Israel, right? That's the people group. That's the name. That's just interesting. It's not called the Hebrews. It's not called like the tribes. Just Israel camped there in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him from the mountain. Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the Israelites, You've seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Pause, right? I'm recalling the prophet Isaiah. That'll lift you up on eagle's wings. You'll not grow weary. You will not faint. Now, therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine. But you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the Israelites. So Moses went, he summoned the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. The people all answered as one, everything that the Lord has spoken we will do. Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. Pause. Moses is intermediary, right? He's going between. He's acting as priest between the people and God. Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud in order that the people may hear when I speak with you and so trust you ever after. Verse 10. When Moses had told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and prepare for the 3rd day, because on the 3rd day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set limits for the people all around, saying, Be careful not to go up the mountain or to touch the edge of it. Any who touch the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch them, but they shall be stoned or shot with arrows. Whether animal or human being, they shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they may go up on the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people. He consecrated the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, Prepare for the 3rd day. Do not go near a woman. Women. On the That's where I'm going to pause for a moment. That's my joke. That's my joke. But later in Levitical law, right, if you have congress with a woman, you may or may not be ceremonially unclean. And so this is about, I don't want to say sexual purity, because when I say that we think about like, I need to be a virgin before my wedding night. That's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about sexual relations in general and about how there's clean and unclean. And so this is about being ritually pure. So prepare for the 3rd day, do not go near a woman. On the morning of the 3rd day, there was thunder and lightning, as well as a thick cloud on the mountain and a blast of a trumpet, so loud that all the people who were in the camp trembled. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now all at Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. The smoke went up like the smoke of a kiln, while the whole mountain shook violently. Pause for a moment, right? Smoke of a kiln. We will remember that they baked bricks in Egypt, so they know what a kiln is, right? They worked them. The whole mountain shook violently. As the blast of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses would speak, and God would answer him in thunder. When the Lord descended upon Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, the Lord summoned Moses to the top of the mountain. And Moses went up. Then the Lord said to Moses, Go down and warn the people not to break through to see the Lord. Otherwise many of them will perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them. Moses said to the Lord, the people are not permitted to come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set limits around the mountain and keep it holy. The Lord said to him, go down then, come back up, and bring Aaron with you. But do not let either the priests or the people break through to come up to the Lord. Otherwise he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. Exodus 20, right? We're tracking together? Okay, I got to step back because it's so granular. Here we go. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am the Lord your God. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. Is that your God? Yes. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. That's a long law. All right, honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, period. You shall not commit adultery, period. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female slave, ox, donkey, Cadillac, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. When all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountains smoking, they were afraid and trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moses, you speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, for God has come only to test you and to put the fear of him upon you, so that you do not sin. Then the people stood at a distance while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. The Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the Israelites, you have seen for yourselves how I spoke with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver alongside me, nor shall you make for yourselves gods of gold. You need make for me only an altar of earth and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your offerings of well-being, your sheep and your oxen, in every place where I cause my name to be remembered. I will come to you and bless you. But if you make for me an altar of stone, do not build it of hewn stones, for if you use a chisel upon it, you profane it. You shall not go up the steps to my altar, so that your nakedness may not be exposed on it. Thus saith the Lord. Ends Exodus 20. Okay. Thoughts. Concerns. I'm going to go back to the 10 words, 10 laws here, sometimes called the Decalogue. I have some notes here, but not very many. I'm curious what you all think.
But the first four refer to God and how you treat God. And the last six
Mm-hmm.
are how you treat each other.
Yeah. I don't know if you all heard that, the distinction between the first four being about one's relationship to God and the last 6 being about relationship to other or neighbor is interesting. As I commented on just reading it, the longest, I think wordiest commandment is that of the Sabbath, which I just think is interesting, right? In terms of cultural identity, Torah, law, and Sabbath are essential markers of someone who follows after Yahweh. Bless you. I want to just pause for a moment and pick your brains. And this took me a long time, probably 30 some odd years. What do you think this, you shall not take the Lord your God? God's name in vain. What is that? What's that commandment all about? If you stub your toe and you say, God, have you broken the commandment? I see some heads shaking yes, I see some shaking no. I hope not.
If you add the other word.
Conversation is, I think misusing God's name is putting God's name on something that God would not approve of. Right? So if I say things like, God wants me to have a Corvette, you know, and I run a great ministry, and so you need to give to the Corvette fund, I think you're guilty of blasphemy.
Yeah.
You're taking God's name in vain. I doubt God told you, I'm going to bless the pastor with the Corvette. You know?
That's why what's his name used to say the devil made me.
So I'm just going to read it again. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Those of you who have other translations, what might it render it or say it as? I'm just curious. Say it nice and loud so those online can hear it on the microphone. Does anyone just have, I think the KJV, right, just says, don't take the Lord your God's name in vain. Let me say it KJV style. Thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. Is that correct? Am I close?
And some people say holy.
Holy hell? Yeah, that's an oxymoron. Yeah.
It says, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain.
Okay. Other translations? Are we similar?
Yeah.
Wrongful use in vain? Do you think that's an appropriate translation? if you strive for something in vain, it has no outcome, like it's not going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I've lost sleep over this one. Maybe not you all. Okay, that's good. What do you make of the Sabbath day and keeping it holy? Questions? We're doing okay? I saw a hand, maybe?
That goes to God working for 6 days and then resting.
Right, yeah, it calls back, right, to God's posture and what God does. And so that law stems all the way back to Genesis, which was already something that we had a discussion about. Some of these laws are already ingrained in who the people are as Israel. Now, whether or not they observed the Sabbath prior to this utterance in Exodus, like did Abraham practice the Sabbath? We'd have to go back and read Genesis with new eyes and see if it says like Abraham rested because it was the Sabbath. I don't think it's in there. I've been wrong before. So, like does it say
I'm never wrong. Mistaken.
mistaken but never wrong? Like is there a text in Genesis where it says, and Jacob rested because it was a Sabbath? I don't think so. And we already read it as a group, but it'd be something to look at. We're doing okay? Other thoughts? I see a question earlier. We're doing okay? Good?
We'll listen for it. We're doing Sunday school. And if we,
Oh, that's really interesting.
When we get there, we'll watch for it.
Well, when Christ came on the scene, this was an issue. Because they said to Jesus, you did that on the Sabbath.
That's right. You let your disciples. Why do you even heal on the Sabbath?
Yeah, I mean, that's not right. It says in here, you do not do that. And Jesus has a good comeback, of course. But that was a big deal.
It was a huge deal.
Huge deal.
If your horse, it's not a horse, but if your horse falls into a pit, you pull him out, even if it's a Sabbath.
There are some things that are permissible on the Sabbath that might be considered work. And there are some things that are not permissible on the Sabbath because it's considered work. And in Jesus' time, you're exactly right. Like, he heals somebody, and they don't like it because apparently healing is considered work.
Well, but they were nitpicking because they could not accuse him of killing anybody. They couldn't accuse him of committing adultery. I mean, all those they couldn't do. So what do? You did first.
Yeah,
Hey, you broke the Sabbath.
he broke
You're a
this
bad
law
If you're a doctor, it
So
is.
that's right. So couldn't get him on the big ones. They got him on the little ones.
on the little ones. Interesting distinction. Okay, we'll notice the first one, too, is about not having any other gods before him. The second one is don't make yourself any idols. What is an idol?
Something you worship in place of God.
Something or something.
Yeah,
Someone.
something or someone in place of God.
Someone or something, yeah.
There are also other types of idols, right? Like you could say,
Money.
yes, so things that represent something else, or it could even be a conduit of God. So the most famous example of idol worship will come into play in a few weeks. It is, I wrote it down in case you wanted to read it. It's Exodus 32. Moses comes down off the mountain, and they're breaking the first 2 commandments.
Yeah.
He's like, I just talked about this, guys. Number 1, no other gods. Number 2, don't make idols. What are you doing? Okay, and they're doing those 2 things. All right, let's push on here because we got about 5-ish minutes left, and I just want to talk about a few things very quickly. One is, this is called the Code of Hammurabi. It is a Babylonian legal text from around the same time-ish, maybe, as parts of the Old Testament were written, depending on your dating and depending on what you believe. It's a black, I think it's basalt, I forget now off the top of my head, but it's 7 feet tall and 4.5 inches tall as the ceiling. This is in the Louvre over in Paris, if you want to go visit and see it. But I'll share this about it real quick, and I pulled this from Wikipedia. But I double-checked it. So this is what it says. The top of the stele, or stele, or however you want to pronounce it, right here. Right at the top of that is an image of Hammurabi with Shamash, the Babylonian sun god and god of justice. Below the relief are 4,130 lines of cuneiform text. Cuneiform is a type of text where you would take like a chisel and you would imprint it. And so it's an old text, old alphabet. 1/5 contains a prologue, an epilogue, yada, 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 while the remaining 4/5 contain what are generally called the law. In the prologue, Hammurabi claims to have been granted his rule by the gods to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. 1755 to 1750 BC. This is a fairly progressive law. The laws are yada, yada, yada. They are expressed as if-then conditional sentences. So if a slave does this, then this. If someone steals, then this. So their scope is pretty broad, including criminal law, family law, property law, and commercial law. And we will see in our law that it covers very much the same thing. So this is an extra biblical example of law. It's a very, very old one. And we encounter a biblical example of law, and I wanted you to know about it because I think that's interesting. So some things to think about in the law that I wrote down here, just some of my notes. Think about the law as a reaction to what the Israelite people experienced in Egypt. So for example, think about the treatment of slaves or the alien among them and how it's expressed in the Old Testament. They're supposed to be kind and hospitable to the alien who resides among them. Because, and it says it in the Old Testament, because you were once an alien in a foreign land. And I had sort of forgotten about that it's blatantly expressed that their ethics, their morals, and their laws stem out of their circumstances. So they need to act this way because Pharaoh didn't treat you like that. So do better, basically. And then, Jewish people are called the Jewish folk are called people of the book or people of the law. It's central to their identity. We've already talked about this. And then we've talked about how Jesus has run-in with the Pharisees and scribes as well. All right. This is my last slide, and it's kind of intentionally all blurry. Not really, but that's just what it is. It's important to know that, over in this column, this is the Ten Commandments are right here, and there's two columns here. This is Exodus, and this is Deuteronomy 5. Are my notes right? Is it Deuteronomy 5? Yes. So those are two spaces where the Ten Commandments are mentioned. Here in Exodus 20, and then they are recaptured in Deuteronomy 5, and they are worded differently. And they are in different orders. And that's just something to be aware of. And so these are the orders that you find them in the different traditions. And the reason why there's some similarities but some differences, because you're comparing the Catholic tradition, the Lutheran tradition, Augustine's writings, the Samaritan, the Talmud. The Talmud is the Babylonian Hebrew Bible. Then you have the Reformed tradition in Philo, and then the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew. So, clear as crystal, right? Their order varies a little bit depending on what tradition you're reading. So if you go to a courthouse and they got the Ten Commandments, and then you go to another courthouse and they're in a different order, it's because they're pulling from a different tradition. And I just think that's important to recognize. Okay, one final thought here. And this is all, I'm just going to read my notes. I got a little paragraph here. It says, there is no social law and religious law. They are one and the same. So the social life is integrated into the moral and religious life. There is no sense, when you're a Hebrew person, of what I do in private in my own home is up to me. As Americans, we often think of law as like, you can't tell me what to do on my property, or if it's my sheep or my wife or my car, I do what I want. That's what we think of in terms of our Western mindset of individuals. But for the Jewish people, their law is both religious and secular. Right? They don't have a parliament, a constitution, a king, a ruler. They're going to ask for it. They're going to ask for that. We want a king like the other nations. And Samuel's like, this is a bad idea. No, we really want one. Samuel says, this is a bad idea. Fine, you get Saul. and then it's David, and then it's Solomon, and then it's bad. So remember, the law that they're given is both religious and personal or civic. When we think of law, we'll think of like, you and I think of separation of church and state. We think of civic laws like speed limits and drug charges and, stealing. But for them, religious law and civic law are the same thing. And there's no such thing as private life. I'll say it again. There's no such thing in their mind as private life. They can't say like, I'm trying to think of like a private law.
Smoking in your
Okay, so like smoking in my own home versus smoking in a bowling alley or smoking in a bar or smoking at a restaurant. Israel's going to have a law that just says, thou shalt not smoke. And we would say, I can smoke on my own property if I want. I'm not hurting anybody, but I understand when I go to McDonald's, I can't smoke, and that's the law. But for the Israelite people, they are one and the same. Okay.
You think they told on each other?
I don't know. You know, I about looked up that story. There's a story, I want to say it's in Exodus. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've read this. But there is someone who is withholding. Do y'all remember the story? There's someone who's withholding tithe to the temple, and they bury it in their tent. Do y'all know this story? And then a pestilence comes upon the people, and then they basically say, so-and-so, my wife has the idol, it's buried under here.
Well, you know, Rachel.
I'll look it up for next week.
Your father's gods and your camel.
Yes, when she's coming back.
That's different.
Yeah, there's something about, I'll look it up. Because
Well, and
go ahead.
The two people that sell a lot and only give part of it to the rest of the,
To the group, to the temple.
yeah, that's in the New Testament,
Is it?
yeah.
I believe you. It's a big book.
Oh, it's in Acts.
Okay.
But all this that we're talking about, if it hadn't been for Jesus, we wouldn't even talk about this.
That's right.
As
I
we,
mean, Jesus brought this to us, and he was a Jew, and he said, this is Jewish law. And because Jesus did this, and did what he did, and what we believe Jesus did, if that had not happened, would we, I mean, I look at these people and all these cultures back thousands of years ago, and they're just looking for ways to make sense out of what is going on in the world, in their lives, and where they live, and why are they here, and what, they're all trying to figure this out. The Jews said, we've got to figure it out. But if Jesus had never come along to tell us all about this, would we even be doing this?
That's right. Yeah. It makes you think about how radically the world has changed because of his life, right? Yeah, that's a wonderful note.
made after
Thank you.
Jesus.
Sorry?
Our calendar is made from Jesus.
That's right. Yeah, it's impacted everything. Okay, so that was Exodus 19 to 20. If you would like to linger and discuss more things about law, I'm happy to stay and linger for a set amount of time. I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll go from there. Yes, ma'am.
What we're covering next time.
Yeah, I wrote that down. We will be covering Exodus 20 through 31. Fear not. It'll mostly be about the tabernacle.
Yeah, oh, that's so good.
Well, it is interesting. There's a lot of imagery.
But it's so repetitive.
Yeah, it is repetitious. Repetitive, that's the word I'm looking for. So, but it is, if you do want to read ahead, it is Exodus 20 through 31 if you want to skim. Or just remember, he's talking about the tabernacle next week. And that's what we'll talk about. All right, let's pray. Holy God, thank you for, the law. Thank you for guiding our steps, for showing us how to live rightly in relationship with you and relationship with others. We give you thanks for the grace and love when we fall short and the redemption that we have through